A student insulted me in class and live-streamed the fallout, but it was later revealed that this was an act of grief from his dog passing away, so I forgave him. But his mom criticized me for not using corporal punishment. I used to teach the 5th graders of a prestigious elementary school in Silicon Valley, and because it's in a nice area, people always assume that it's a seamless, cushy job to have. And at one point, that might have been true. But recently, it's quite the opposite. Ever since 2021, kids have been addicted to their phones, not wanting to listen, and frankly, not giving an F about anything other than their friends and social media pages. One time during a math quiz, a student got up and left. I thought he was just going to the bathroom, but then he returned with a McDonald's order that he asked his brother to order for him using his Apple Watch. I calmly told him he either had to leave it in his locker or throw it out. And that's when he whipped out his iPhone XR and started live streaming on his Instagram, telling all his followers what a cruel, awful teacher I was. And at the time, there were no actual rules for what I should or shouldn't do in that situation. So I simply brought him to the dreaded principal's office and returned back to the classroom. Things were pretty smooth sailing after that, until the incident. We were coming to the end of a game of Kahoot, and it was time for the class to put their very expensive iPhones away. As expected, everyone took their time with it, trying to make their last seconds of scrolling count. But eventually, they listened, except for one student, Liam. When I told him he wasn't the exception, and he had to put his phone where he couldn't see it, he lost it. My dad pays more in taxes than you make in a year, so don't talk to me like we're equals. The whole class turned around, too shocked to even laugh. Well, that wasn't my first rodeo, so I just sighed and handed him a detention slip. He dramatically flung his head back until his face was staring at the ceiling and rolled his eyes. But because I have the patience of a worm, I just continued teaching. But the next morning, I regretted doing so. Because as I went into the classroom with my morning coffee, I saw a note on my table. It was written red paper and looked like Liam's handwriting. For my own amusement, I started an internal guessing game in my head of what it could be. Death threat? Blackmail? Another note telling me I was ugly, old, and ran through? But I was wrong. It wasn't any of these things. Instead, it was an apology. I was upset because I just got a text that my dog died, but I shouldn't have said that. You were trying to help. I'm sorry. My heart broke. Looking back, I recalled tears in his eyes. A wave of guilt hit me for not realizing something was wrong. And that's when the bell rang. All the students came running in, but I couldn't see Liam anywhere. And honestly, I was glad. I figured he had taken the day off to recuperate after he found out the news, so the rest of the day went business as usual. But I never saw him again. Until the end of the next day, that is. I was leaving the school gates when his mom ran towards me. She looked so angry I thought smoke would actually start coming out of her ears. Apparently, Liam told her about what he had said, and about the note too. That's okay. I'm just glad that he apologized. What? That's all you have to say for yourself? I stared at her blankly, and she started a rant about how corporal punishment needs to come back, about how I'm too soft, and this is why she had to take matters into her own hands. I didn't know what was going on, but that's when she pulled up Liam's jumper to show me exactly what she meant. What I saw made my heart stop. I had to hold back from clocking her right on the spot, because little did she know, I was more than just a teacher. I just never had a reason to assert my power, until that moment. What Karen Walsh didn't know about me was that before I became a teacher, I spent 8 years as a child advocate attorney. I left that career because the burnout was destroying me, but I still maintained my license and my connections. I carefully took my phone out and snapped a quick photo while maintaining eye contact with Karen. Mrs. Walsh, I'd like you to stay right here while I call the principal to join us. Why would you need to do that? I'm just showing you that someone is teaching my son respect, she scoffed. I lowered my voice so only she could hear me. What you've just shown me is evidence of child abuse, which I am legally mandated to report, and I will be reporting it immediately. Her face went from smug to panic in about half a second. You wouldn't dare. Do you know who my husband is? He'll have your job before you can even file a report. I smiled thinly. I'm not just a teacher, Mrs. Walsh. I'm also a licensed attorney who specialized in child welfare law for 8 years. So please tell me more about how your husband will silence me. For the first time, I saw fear flash across her face. Good. Liam, I said gently, would you mind waiting in my classroom for a few minutes? Ms. Jansen should still be there. Tell her I sent you to help organize the bookshelf. He looked at his mother, who was too shocked to protest, then nodded and walked back toward the school building. I watched him go, noticing how his shoulders hunched forward protectively as he walked away. I turned back to Karen Walsh. Now, we have 2 options here. You can leave, and I'll call CPS immediately. Or you can come with me to the principal's office, and we can discuss what happens next. And that's how I found myself sitting across from Principal Rodriguez with a furious helicopter mom who had just realized she'd admitted to child abuse in front of possibly the worst person she could have. Principal Rodriguez had seen everything in her 15 years running the school, but even she looked unsettled as we sat in her office. Karen was still fuming but had switched tactics from aggression to victim mode. This is all a misunderstanding, she insisted, dabbing at non-existent tears with a tissue. Liam bruises easily. He has a medical condition. I raised an eyebrow. A medical condition that creates finger-shaped bruises? Rodriguez cleared her throat. Mrs. Walsh, these are very serious allegations. As mandated reporters, we're required by law to contact Child Protective Services when we suspect abuse. My husband is on the board of directors for 3 major tech companies, Karen hissed. One call from him and both of you will be looking for new careers. I pulled out my phone. I've already texted my former colleague at CPS. She's on her way. This was a bluff, but Karen didn't need to know that. Rodriguez shot me a surprised look, but quickly composed herself. Mrs. Walsh, threats won't help this situation. What will help is being honest about what's happening at home. Karen's perfectly highlighted hair seemed to bristle. You have no right to question my parenting. Liam needs discipline. He's been acting out, failing tests, talking back. What am I supposed to do? Not hit him, I said flatly. The conversation went in circles for another 20 minutes. Karen denied, threatened, cried, then got angry again. Meanwhile, I texted my actual contact at CPS, Margaret Chen. We'd worked dozens of cases together before I left law for teaching. She responded immediately, saying she'd be there within the hour. Rodriguez was trying to keep things calm. Mrs. Walsh, where is your husband right now? Business trip in Tokyo, she snapped. Not that it's any of your business. That explained a lot. Dad away, mom feeling overwhelmed, taking it out on Liam. Classic, but still inexcusable. When Margaret arrived, Karen's face went pale. Reality was setting in. Margaret was all business in her navy pantsuit, case folder already in hand. She'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by designer clothes or threats about board connections. Mrs. Walsh, I'm Margaret Chen from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with Liam privately, and then we'll talk. Karen started to object, but Margaret just stared her down until she shut up. It's why I'd always admired Margaret. She could silence entitled parents with just a look. Margaret and I stepped outside. She gave me a quick side hug. Never thought you'd be back in the trenches, Ms. Thompson. Me neither, I admitted. But here we are. She nodded toward the classroom where Liam was waiting. What's your assessment? Multiple bruises, different stages of healing. Mom admitted to disciplining him physically. Father's away on business frequently. Kids clearly terrified of her. Margaret's face hardened. Got it. I'll talk to him first, then decide next steps. I waited outside while Margaret interviewed Liam. 20 minutes later, she emerged looking grim. It's worse than the arm bruises, she said quietly. Belt marks on his back. Been going on since his dad started traveling more about 6 months ago. My stomach dropped. 6 months. The same time I'd noticed his grades slipping and attitude changing. I'd chalked it up to preteen angst, never suspecting this. What happens now? I asked, though I already knew the procedure. Temporary emergency removal while we investigate further. Mom will be formally interviewed. Dad needs to be contacted. Court hearing within 72 hours. I nodded. Where will Liam go? That's the problem. Foster placement is tight right now. He'll probably end up at the Emergency Children's Center for tonight. The emergency center was basically a glorified detention facility. I'd fought for years to get kids placed elsewhere, with limited success. What about a family friend? Any relatives nearby? I asked. Margaret shook her head. I asked. Grandparents are in Connecticut. No close family friends he felt safe with. I made a decision that I'd been contemplating since I first saw those bruises. After all, I still had the training and credentials from my previous career. I'll take him. Margaret raised her eyebrows. You know that's complicated, especially as his teacher. Former attorney, remember? I'm still on the approved emergency placement list. Never got around to removing myself. I'd been a foster parent for brief emergency placements during my legal career. Margaret considered this. Let me make some calls. It's unusual, but not impossible given your background. While Margaret worked the system, I returned to Rodriguez's office. Karen was on her phone, frantically texting someone, probably her husband, though the time difference meant it was middle of the night in Tokyo. Mrs. Walsh, I said, CPS is going to be removing Liam temporarily while they investigate. She jumped to her feet. You can't do that. I want my lawyer here now. That's your right, I replied calmly, but it doesn't change the immediate safety concerns for Liam. What followed was an hour of paperwork, phone calls, and Karen alternating between threats and tearful pleas. Finally, Margaret got approval for me to take Liam as an emergency placement for up to 72 hours until the initial court hearing. When we told Liam about the arrangement, he looked confused. I'm staying with Ms. Thompson, like, at her house? Just for a couple of days, Margaret explained, while we figure things out. What about my mom? He asked, voice small. She needs to talk to some people about how to be a better parent, I said, trying to simplify without lying. Sometimes grown-ups need help too. Karen was still arguing with a second CPS worker who'd arrived to process the case, so Margaret helped us slip out a side door. I helped Liam into my beaten-up Honda Civic, quite a contrast from the Lexus SUV his mom drove. We need to stop by your house to get some clothes and things, I explained. Is there anything special you want to bring? He thought for a moment. My pillow, and my Nintendo Switch. Sure thing. I tried to sound casual, like I took students home all the time. When we reached the Walsh residence, a sprawling modern home in one of those gated communities, I had to sign in with security. The guard gave me a suspicious look as I explained I was Liam's teacher picking up some things for him. Inside, the house was immaculate, like something from an architectural magazine. Cold, though. Not many family photos. Lots of expensive art. My room's upstairs, Liam said, leading the way. His bedroom was the only space that looked lived in. Gaming posters, clothes on the floor, unmade bed, normal kid stuff. I helped him pack a backpack while he grabbed his Switch and chargers. As we were leaving, he paused at a door down the hall. Can I say goodbye to Max? Max? My new dog. Mom got him after Rusty died. So there was another dog. The note about his dog dying had been true. I felt that guilt again about not recognizing his grief. Sure, go ahead. He opened the door to reveal a small mudroom with a puppy crate. Inside was a golden retriever puppy, maybe 4 months old, whining with excitement at seeing Liam. Liam knelt down. I'll be back soon, Max. Be good. He turned to me, worried. Who's gonna take care of him? My mom doesn't really like him. She just got him to shut me up about Rusty. Great. Another complication. Let's bring him with us for now. We'll figure it out. So that's how I ended up driving back to my modest apartment with not just an abused 5th grader, but also a golden retriever puppy who promptly peed on my carpet within 5 minutes of arrival. Sorry, Liam mumbled, looking terrified that he'd be punished for the dog's accident. It's fine, I assured him, grabbing paper towels. Accidents happen. My apartment wasn't set up for kids or pets. 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, mostly books everywhere. I quickly converted my couch into a bed for Liam while Max explored his new temporary home. That first night was awkward. I had no idea what to feed a 10-year-old for dinner, so I ordered pizza. Liam barely spoke, just answered direct questions with one-word responses. He kept watching me carefully, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. After setting him up with blankets and pillows on the couch, I retreated to my bedroom but couldn't sleep. The reality of what I'd gotten myself into was sinking in. I hadn't practiced family law in years. I had no business getting personally involved in this case. Around midnight, I heard Liam crying softly. I found him curled up with Max, tears silently streaming down his face. Hey, I said gently, sitting on the edge of the couch. It's okay to be upset. He wiped his eyes quickly. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. This is a really hard situation. He was quiet for a long time, then whispered, Is my mom going to jail? I sighed. Probably not. Most likely she'll need to take parenting classes and anger management, maybe therapy. My dad's going to be so mad. Something in his tone worried me. At your mom? Or at you? Liam shrugged. Both, probably. He hates when there are problems. None of this is your fault, Liam. You know that, right? He didn't respond, just petted Max's head. I didn't push it. The next morning was Saturday. I made pancakes, which Liam barely touched. We took Max for a walk, then spent most of the day awkwardly coexisting. Liam played his Switch while I graded papers and made phone calls. Margaret called with updates. She'd spoken to Liam's father, who was catching the next flight back from Tokyo. He sounded shocked and concerned, but Margaret was reserving judgment until she met him in person. Court hearing is Monday at 9 a.m., she told me. Judge Winters. That was good news. Judge Winters was fair, but took child safety seriously. I'd won many cases in her courtroom. What's your read on the dad? I asked. Hard to tell over the phone. He seemed genuinely surprised about the abuse allegations, but these guys often are, or pretend to be. Says he travels 60% of the time for work. Claims he had no idea Karen was disciplining Liam physically. Do you believe him? I'm withholding judgment until I see him interact with Liam, Margaret said. The mom is another story. She's lawyered up with some hotshot family attorney, still insisting she did nothing wrong. After hanging up, I noticed Liam watching me. Was that about me? He asked. I nodded. Your dad's coming home. There's a court hearing on Monday to decide what happens next. Will I have to go to court? No, not this time. This is just a preliminary hearing. He looked relieved, then anxious again. Will I have to go back home after? The question caught me off guard. That depends on what the judge decides is safest for you. I don't want to go back if my mom's there, he whispered. That night, after Liam fell asleep, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I pulled up all the information I could find on the Walsh family. Joseph Walsh, Liam's father, was a senior vice president at a major tech company. Karen was on the board of several charities. Picture perfect Silicon Valley family on paper. I dug deeper, pulling some strings with old legal contacts. Joseph traveled constantly. Karen had a prescription history that included anxiety medication and sleeping pills. There had been a police call to their residence about a year ago, a domestic disturbance that was never filed as an official report. Sunday morning, I was making coffee when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a tall, tired-looking man in rumpled business clothes. Joseph Walsh had found us. How did you get my address? I asked, blocking the doorway. The CPS worker told me. I just landed from Tokyo. Please, I need to see my son. His voice cracked on the last word. I studied him carefully. Red-rimmed eyes, disheveled appearance. Either genuine distress or a good performance. Liam's still sleeping. Please, I've been on a plane for 14 hours, imagining the worst. I reluctantly stepped aside to let him in. Joseph's eyes widened at the modest apartment, so different from his luxury home. Ms. Thompson, I want you to know I had no idea what Karen was doing. None. His voice was urgent. I travel constantly. When I'm home, Liam seems fine. Quiet, maybe, but I thought that was just preteen stuff. Mr. Walsh, I'm not the one you need to convince. Before he could respond, Liam appeared from the living room, Max at his heels. The boy froze when he saw his father. Dad? Joseph crossed the room and knelt in front of Liam. Hey, buddy. He reached out but stopped short of touching him. Are you okay? Liam nodded stiffly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Can I see? Joseph asked gently. Liam hesitated, then slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing the bruises. Joseph's face went gray. Oh my God, he whispered. Liam, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You're never home, Liam said flatly. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. That's going to change. I promise. I cleared my throat. Mr. Walsh, I think we should let the court process play out before making promises. He stood up, straightening his shoulders. Of course. The CPS worker said there's a hearing tomorrow. I've already told my company I'm taking a leave of absence, and I've asked Karen to move out temporarily. That surprised me. She agreed. She didn't have much choice. I made it clear it was that or I'd file for emergency sole custody today. I nodded, silently reassessing Joseph Walsh. Maybe he really hadn't known. After an awkward breakfast, where Joseph tried too hard to act normal and Liam responded with monosyllables, I suggested they take Max for a walk. They needed time alone, and I needed to prepare for tomorrow's hearing. I wasn't officially representing Liam, but old habits die hard. When they returned, Liam seemed marginally more relaxed. Joseph looked determined. I've been talking with Liam, he said. I'm going to request that he stay with me, at home, with supervision from CPS. Karen will stay with her sister until this is resolved. That will be up to the judge, I reminded him. I understand, but I want you to know I'm taking this seriously. He handed me a business card. My attorney. I've instructed her to cooperate fully with CPS. I want what's best for Liam, even if that means admitting I failed him by not being present. After Joseph left, promising to see Liam at court the next day, I found Liam sitting on the couch, petting Max absently. You okay? I asked. I guess. He looked up at me. My dad says I might go home with him tomorrow. How do you feel about that? Liam considered the question. Okay, I think. If my mom's not there. He hesitated. He said he's going to work from home now, and that we might get a nanny. That sounds like a good plan. I sat next to him. Liam, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know you can always talk to me. Not just as your teacher, but as someone who cares about you. He nodded, then surprised me by asking, how come you know so much about all this court stuff? Before I was a teacher, I was a lawyer. I helped kids in situations like yours. Why'd you stop? Good question. I'd asked myself the same thing many times over the past few days. It was hard, seeing kids hurt all the time. I thought teaching would be happier. Is it? I laughed. Most days. Not when students live stream me on Instagram, though. That got a small smile from him. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Margaret picked us up early to head to the courthouse. Liam was quiet, dressed in the nicest clothes he'd packed, khakis and a button-down shirt. Max had to stay at my apartment, which Liam wasn't happy about. The courthouse was familiar territory for me, but I saw it through Liam's eyes. Imposing, sterile, intimidating. We met Joseph in the hallway outside the courtroom. He'd had a haircut and was wearing a suit. Karen was nowhere to be seen. She's already inside with her attorney, Joseph explained. We're seated separately. Margaret briefed us on the procedure. This was just a preliminary hearing to establish temporary custody arrangements while the investigation continued. I would be called as a witness since I was the reporting party and current emergency placement. When we entered the courtroom, I immediately spotted Karen with a sharp-looking attorney I recognized, Patricia Redding, notorious for aggressive defense of wealthy clients accused of domestic issues. Great. Judge Winters was already reviewing documents when the bailiff called the court to order. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. I'd always respected her no-nonsense approach. This is a preliminary protective custody hearing in the matter of Liam Walsh, she announced. I've reviewed the initial CPS report and supporting documentation. Let's begin with Ms. Chen's current assessment and recommendation. Margaret presented her findings clearly and professionally, the physical evidence of abuse, Liam's statements, the history of behavioral changes at school. She recommended temporary custody with the father, with CPS supervision and mandatory services for both parents. Patricia Redding jumped up to cross-examine Margaret, trying to paint Karen as an overwhelmed mother who had made a one-time mistake. Margaret didn't budge, calmly referring to the photographic evidence of multiple bruises in various stages of healing. When it was my turn to testify, I felt the familiar courtroom rhythm return. I described finding the note, seeing the bruises, and my interactions with both parents. Redding went after me hard. Ms. Thompson, isn't it true you have a personal history with these types of cases that might color your perception? I have professional experience that helps me recognize signs of abuse. Yes, I replied. And isn't it convenient that you, a teacher with no current legal standing, managed to get yourself appointed as temporary guardian? One might think you're trying to involve yourself unnecessarily in this family's private matters. I kept my cool. I was on the emergency placement list due to my previous work as a child advocate attorney. My only concern is Liam's safety. Joseph's attorney, a calm, professional woman named Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Margaret, presented a detailed plan for Liam's care. Joseph working from home, a live-in nanny with experience in child development, weekly check-ins with CPS, and family therapy. Karen testified next, tearfully explaining that she'd been under tremendous stress and made a terrible mistake. She insisted it wouldn't happen again. Judge Winters watched her impassively, occasionally making notes. Joseph's testimony was brief, but impactful. He admitted his frequent absences had created a situation where he wasn't aware of what was happening in his own home. He took responsibility for not being present and outlined concrete steps he was taking to change that. After nearly 3 hours, Judge Winters called a short recess to consider her ruling. We waited tensely in the hallway. Liam sat between Joseph and me, not speaking. When court resumed, Judge Winters didn't waste time. Having considered all testimony and evidence, I find sufficient cause to believe that Liam Walsh's physical welfare has been endangered in his mother's care. Temporary custody is granted to the father, Joseph Walsh, with the following conditions. She outlined strict requirements, announced weekly home visits from CPS, the approved live-in nanny starting immediately, family therapy for Joseph and Liam, separate therapy for Karen, and a parenting class for both parents. Karen would have supervised visitation only, after completing at least 4 therapy sessions. This arrangement will be reviewed in 60 days, Judge Winters concluded. If all parties comply with services and show improvement, we will reassess. The court's primary concern is Liam's safety and well-being. Karen burst into tears as the ruling was announced. Patricia Redding immediately began discussing appeal options with her. Joseph placed a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder. Ready to go home, buddy? Liam looked at me uncertainly. I gave him an encouraging nod. What about Max? He asked. He's coming too, of course. Outside the courthouse, Margaret pulled me aside while Joseph and Liam waited by the car. You did good work here, she said. Maybe you should consider coming back to legal advocacy. We could use you. I watched Liam with his father. There was still tension, still uncertainty, but also possibility. I'll think about it, I said. Joseph approached us. Ms. Thompson, I can't thank you enough for protecting my son when I failed to. Just keep your promises to him, I said. That's all the thanks I need. Would you? He hesitated. Would you be willing to stay involved? Maybe check in sometimes? Liam trusts you. I looked at Liam, waiting by the car with a mix of hope and fear on his face. I thought about all the kids like him in my classroom, carrying burdens I might not see. I thought about how easy it would have been to miss what was happening if he hadn't left that note. Yes, I said finally. I'll stay involved. As Joseph and Liam drove away, Margaret gave me a knowing look. So, about that job offer, I laughed. Let me get through the rest of the school year first. But I knew something had shifted. Whether as a teacher or an attorney or some combination of both, I had rediscovered something I thought I'd lost. The ability to make a real difference in a child's life. And no amount of classroom management issues or entitled parents could take that away. I walked back to my car feeling weirdly energized. The familiar weight of child advocacy work had settled back on my shoulders. But instead of feeling burdened, I felt purposeful. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Think about it. We could use someone with your fire. I didn't respond right away. Teaching had been my escape route when legal work became too intense. Now I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. That week at school, things felt different. I kept finding myself scanning my students' faces more carefully, wondering what they might be hiding, and I missed Liam. After the intensity of that weekend, the classroom felt strangely empty without him. On Thursday, I got an email from Joseph Walsh, a progress update. He'd hired a nanny named Rosa, a grandmotherly woman with a background in early childhood development. Liam was back at school, though he'd transferred to another classroom to avoid awkwardness. Max was adjusting well to the house. Karen had attended her first therapy session. He'd attached a photo of Liam smiling cautiously while holding Max. Something about it made my throat tight. I replied with something professional but supportive, offering to help with schoolwork if needed. Later that evening, my principal called. The rumor mill had been working overtime, apparently. Parents were talking. Some were concerned about a teacher getting involved with a student's home life. Others were supportive. The school board had questions. "You're not in trouble," Rodriguez assured me, "but we need to discuss how to handle this situation going forward." The meeting with the administration the next day was tense. The superintendent, a political animal named Thomas, seemed more concerned about the school's reputation than Liam's well-being. "Parents are worried you overstepped your role," he said, leaning back in Rodriguez's visitor chair like he owned it. "I followed mandated reporter protocols exactly," I replied, "and my emergency foster parent status was already established before I began teaching. Still, it creates a perception issue." He tapped his pen against his notepad. "Some parents are concerned you might be overly scrutinizing their parenting choices now." I fought back an eye roll. "You mean the parents who physically abuse their children are worried I'll notice?" Rodriguez shot me a warning look. "Ms. Thompson acted appropriately in a difficult situation," she told Thomas. The court agreed. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. Thomas wanted me to maintain appropriate professional boundaries going forward. I left feeling irritated and unsettled. That weekend, Margaret invited me for coffee. She slid a folder across the table before I'd even taken my first sip. "What's this?" I asked, already knowing. "Job description. Child Advocacy Center is looking for a part-time legal consultant. 15 hours a week to start." I pushed it back toward her. "I'm still teaching full-time. For now." She sipped her latte calmly. "How's that going, by the way? Getting any support from the administration after sticking your neck out for a kid?" I made a face. "That obvious, huh? I've known you for 10 years. You look exactly like you did before you quit last time." I couldn't argue with that. The familiar symptoms were creeping back. Trouble sleeping, hypervigilance, carrying other people's trauma home with me. And now I had school politics to deal with too. "I'll consider it," I said, pocketing the folder. The following Wednesday, I got another update from Joseph. Liam was having nightmares. The therapist said it was normal, part of processing trauma. Rosa was helping, sleeping in the adjacent room so she could respond quickly. Karen's supervised visits weren't going well. She kept trying to justify her actions to Liam, making him shut down. I wrote back with some suggestions for dealing with nightmares, based on my experience with other foster kids. Then, without overthinking it, I asked if I could visit that weekend. Joseph replied almost immediately. "Liam would love that. Saturday lunch?" Saturday found me driving back to the Walsh residence with a knot of nerves in my stomach. This time, I pulled up to the security gate as an invited guest. The house looked the same from the outside. Modernist, expensive, impersonal, but inside felt different. For one thing, there was noise. The sound of a dog barking excitedly, the TV playing some kind of video game background music, Rosa calling out something from the kitchen in Spanish. It felt lived in now. Max reached me first, all gangly puppy enthusiasm. Liam appeared more cautiously from the living room, but his face brightened when he saw me. "Ms. Thompson, I got to level 50 on that game I told you about." Just like that, we were okay. The awkwardness of our strange shared experience faded as he launched into detailed explanations of his gaming achievements. Joseph watched from the doorway, relief evident on his face. Lunch was surprisingly normal. Rosa had made enchiladas that put my sad teacher microwave meals to shame. Liam chatted about his new school, occasionally directing comments to his dad, who was clearly trying hard to engage. After eating, Joseph suggested Liam show me the backyard renovations. "We're putting in a proper dog run for Max," he explained. While Liam took Max outside, Joseph poured us both iced tea. "He's doing better," he said quietly. "The therapist says he's resilient, but there are moments..." He trailed off. "Nightmares still happening?" I asked. He nodded. "Less frequently, and he's talking about them now, which helps." "What about Karen?" Joseph's expression hardened. "She's still angry, blames everyone but herself. The therapist says she's not really engaging with the process. And the court review is coming up in about a month," I remembered. "Yeah." He looked worried. "What if she convinces them she's changed? What if they send him back to her? Do you have a good attorney?" "The best I could find. But you know how these things go. The system pushes for reunification." I did know. I'd seen too many kids return to homes that weren't ready, all in the name of keeping families together. "I've been thinking about that actually," I said carefully. "I might be taking on some part-time legal consulting work again. If you wanted, I could look over your case files, maybe provide some insights." Joseph's relief was palpable. "That would be, yes, please." Over the next few weeks, I fell into a new routine. Teaching during the day, reviewing case files, and speaking with Joseph's attorney in the evenings, occasional weekend visits with Liam. I also officially accepted Margaret's job offer, starting at 10 hours per week. My principal was surprisingly supportive when I told her about my part-time legal work. "Always thought you'd go back to it someday," she said. "Just don't leave us hanging mid-year, okay?" The truth was, I was enjoying the balance. Teaching gave me the daily joy of working with kids when they were just being kids. The legal work satisfied my need to fight the bigger battles. Together, they felt sustainable in a way neither career had been on its own. As the 60-day court review approached, I helped Joseph's attorney prepare. Karen had completed the minimum required therapy sessions, but her therapist's report was mixed at best. She'd shown little insight into how her behavior affected Liam. She blamed stress, Joseph's absence, even Liam himself for provoking her. 2 days before the hearing, Joseph called me in a panic. "Karen's filing for joint custody. Her attorney says she's met all the court's requirements." I spent that evening reviewing documents until my eyes blurred. Technically, Karen had checked all the boxes, attended therapy, completed parenting classes, maintained supervised visits, but the quality of her participation was questionable at best. "Focus on Liam's current stability versus the risk of disruption," I advised Joseph's attorney, "and get the therapist to testify about Liam's anxiety around his mother." The morning of the hearing, I met Joseph at the courthouse. I wasn't officially part of the case, just moral support. Liam was at school. We'd all agreed this hearing would be too stressful for him to attend. Karen arrived with Patricia Redding, looking polished and determined. She'd lost weight, styled her hair differently, dressed more conservatively. The physical transformation was impressive, but her eyes still held that cold entitlement when she spotted me sitting with Joseph. Judge Winters reviewed the case files carefully, asking pointed questions about the therapy reports. Karen testified about her journey of self-discovery and how much she'd grown as a person. It was a good performance, and I felt my stomach knot with worry. Joseph spoke honestly about the changes at home, how Liam was doing better in school, having fewer nightmares, forming a bond with Rosa. He admitted his own failings as an absent father and detailed the concrete steps he'd taken to be more present. When the therapist testified, the contrast became clearer. Liam's therapist described his ongoing anxiety about returning to his mother's care. Karen's therapist acknowledged she had participated in sessions but noted concerns about her level of insight and accountability. During a brief recess, I spotted Karen in the hallway, arguing with her attorney. They noticed me watching and moved away, but the tension was obvious. Something wasn't going according to plan. When court resumed, Patricia Redding requested a private conference with the judge. After a short closed-door meeting, Judge Winters returned looking somber. In light of new information brought to the court's attention, Mrs. Walsh is withdrawing her request for joint custody at this time, she announced. She is instead proposing continued supervised visitation with a stepwise increase in time if progress is maintained. I glanced at Joseph, who looked as surprised as I felt. Karen sat stiffly beside her attorney, lips pressed together. Judge Winters continued. The court finds this modification reasonable and in the child's best interest. Mr. Walsh will maintain primary custody, with continued CPS supervision for another 90 days. Mrs. Walsh will continue therapy with bi-weekly updates to the court. Supervised visitation will continue, with potential for unsupervised day visits to be considered at the next review if sufficient progress is shown. As we left the courtroom, I wondered what had happened in that private conference. Joseph was too relieved to question our good fortune. Later that evening, Margaret called me. Heard you had a good outcome today. Yeah, unexpectedly smooth. Karen backed down on joint custody at the last minute. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Word is, her therapist threatened to testify about some concerning statements she made during sessions. Something about planning to take Liam out of state once she got joint custody. That explained it. Even Patricia Redding wouldn't risk her legal reputation on that kind of scheme. Anyway, Margaret continued, just wanted to say that file you sent over about the Rodriguez case was excellent. The team's impressed. We could definitely use more hours from you if you're interested. I thought about my classroom, about Liam, about all the other kids in similar situations who didn't have anyone fighting for them. Let me get through the school year, I said. Then we'll talk about summer hours. The next few months settled into a steadier rhythm. Liam continued to improve. Joseph remained committed to being present. Karen actually seemed to be taking therapy more seriously now that her quick fix strategy had failed. By the end of the school year, I'd made my decision. I'd keep teaching, but reduce to part-time, allowing me to increase my hours at the Child Advocacy Center. Principal Rodriguez helped arrange my schedule so I could do both. On the last day of school, I received a handmade card from Liam, delivered by his dad. Inside was a crayon drawing of a stick figure with curly hair, me, a taller stick figure, Joseph, and a smaller one, Liam, with a four-legged yellow blob, Max. Thank you for saving me, he'd written in careful block letters. I kept that card on my refrigerator, a reminder of why I did both jobs, why neither one alone was enough. Some kids needed a teacher, some kids needed a lawyer. Sometimes, if they were lucky, they got both in the same person. The system wasn't perfect. Karen was still working toward unsupervised visits. Joseph was still learning how to be an engaged parent. And I was still figuring out my own balance. But Liam was safe, healing, and had people fighting for him from all sides. And really, that's the best outcome you can hope for in these situations. Not perfect, not a fairy tale ending, but better, safer, a chance to heal. Sometimes that's enough.